This presentation is called The Falsity of Dusting on Sich, or the Thing in Itself, or Why Does Zizek Remain Pre-Phenomenological in the Husserlian sense. Of course, in the sense of that language scheint, that meaning scheint or shines through language. We're all permeated with that. That's the proper sense of the meaning of Dasein. However, in the sense of Hegel's phenomenology, or in the sense of the Greek and Latin phenomena, this isn't what we mean by saying that Zizek is pre-phenomenological. We mean rather that in the sense that Husserl has said that the carts omnibus dubitandum, or total doubt, is the first word of phenomenology, establishing its position, which Husserl says is not solipsistic properly, but put forward as Wissenschaft, put forward as something that can be controlled, gained command of by others than himself, is the phenomenology proper, and Zizek hasn't reached this position. That's the argument of this video. The position of phenomenology would seem to us to be prior to the position of fantasy, imagination, and science. So if you think of Zizek's position in terms of Schlegel, or in terms of Lacan's region of fantasy, or in the terms of the material supposedly being underneath what could be burned away, the theoi, or the gods, could be burned away in the fire of subjectivity through the contemplation of fantasy, and or otherwise stated through romanticism. So we must make an aside to say romanticism can't be taken as something like what Roberto Unger or bourgeois philosophy in general takes it to mean, which is the juxtaposition of something like security, secure necessities of a certain regime of life. Somebody has secured a family life, profession, and so on, as over and against the life of the troubadour, or a pink cloud drifting in the ethereal regions. This juxtaposition is the bourgeois notion of romanticism versus the buckled down life, or corporatism, Jamie Dimon, as over and against Van Gogh. That's the bourgeois notion of romanticism. The Prussian notion of romanticism is rather the juxtaposition of the absolute of Hegel, understood as a failed absolute which must be continuously resuscitated. So that Josiah Royce, the American philosopher, has said that best do they know truth, by which he means the truth of the romanticists, are they who have experienced the most moods. So this moving, and in Zizek, I'm wondering if maybe we could transform that kind of notion to, so a constant moving, constant changing, this something that reminds of what was prior to the spirit of Romanticism in Goethe, of the tribe, or the tribe, the tribe, to the endlos, the Unendlichkeit, that which was without end. This is Romanticism more in the sense of the Prussian 19th century intellectual power, which guided all things. We have also another notion which isn't Romanticism, which is closely related, which should be mentioned, which is that so far as the ultimate distinction of the 19th century is Romanticism as against the classical spirit which strives for either Greek completion or Christian perfection. There's also this side thing, science. So remember the Nietzschean perspective on this. You go from the search to completion, perfection, to a different search for completion, perfection, which is stupid and less useful, called science, which is to say, because science only can tell us how to do things but not which things are good. So therefore it can't guide our decisions properly, and so therefore it's stupid. We see science in the light of a kind of failure of science. If so far science is supposed to be the eternal knowledge of God, or something like the Ordo in Aquinas, the how is that said? The Potentia Ordinata, I think. This knowledge of the best things. Let me give it just to give the perspective of the idea where that kind of statement is said. Let me give this notion, which anyway we have to go through anyway, to understand the argument that Zizek hasn't reached phenomenology, which is still in the Schlegelian fantasy, or the romantic irony. Still in this, we'll go from one position to the next position to the next position, always trying to purge ourselves of all things that are subjective, and get to the dusting on Sich, get to the objective, get out of the qualitative things, like anything that could be distorted by a specific form of sensorium, an eye that only sees black and white, an eye that only sees color, but the thing itself. Anything that could disturb us from getting to that, we could show as Lacanian fantasy or Schlegelian romanticism. Aside from this, we have this notion that through science we reach a point where we realize science can't give us what we need to make decisions. It can only tell us how to do things, not what things we should do. We then run away from science, the so-called flight from science, because we realize it's not enough, and then this is called flight into piety, faith, Glaube, however it should be called. So this war between faith and science is a kind of a sideshow in this region. Instead, what we want to look at is the core, where we see the break between romanticism, which is this Unendlichkeit, this unendingness, as against the fullness, or the completion, the perfection of classical thought. That's the main juxtaposition. again, to get the flavor, I didn't get to it actually. To get the flavor of it, let's look at until about the time of Descartes, we had the notion of imagination, which was linked to all real mathematicians in the past always said to themselves, without geometry, math is not really worthwhile. And if you think in terms of geometry, in terms of, say, the Pythagorean method of proving pi, he tries to do it through taking a polygon, taking a two-dimensional geometric figure, and going from what we can imagine. So imagine, like giving an exact example of what imagination meant, is picture to yourself a square. That's a four-sided object. You can count it inside your imagination. 1, 2, 3, 4 sides. Then try to make it 5 sides. See if you can accurately, in your imagination, get yourself to see 5 sides, 6 sides, 7 sides, 8 sides, 9 sides. So if you tried really hard, and say you had been trying since you were 3 years old, like von Neumann with simple math, you could probably get yourself to imagine quite high number of sides in the shape, which is to say, to literally see in the mind's eye those numbers and to accurately hold them in your mind, just as a good grandmaster in chess can hold the whole chessboard in their mind, and sometimes you play 20 games blindfold, which most people can't do. We can train ourselves to use our imagination to do things which are accurate, which key into reality in an effective way. But now one would say, what about 10 to the 35th power sides? What about a polygon with 10 to the 35th power sides? We can't do that. So in our current vernacular, we say, but I could imagine an alien or some kind of being or computer that could do that, but I can't do it myself. We say, I can imagine, but that's not the way imagination was used in the tradition. In the tradition, we would have said the mind can comprehend this idea of a polygon, of a two-dimensional shape with 10 to the 35th sides. The mind can comprehend that very accurately. And this is what we call episteme and mathematicos. That's the realm where the mind can comprehend something, where we're clearly making a leap from something we imagined, but where imagination has the old meaning of something we could accurately picture, to something we clearly understand what we're talking about, 10 to the 35th, because we started with what we could accurately imagine. But now, say there's another thing called fantasy back underneath the imagination, but in the same realm. This is what Schlegel points to, this total clearing out. Not only are we clearing out of the objects of nous, of the objects of the things on Plato, the Platonic divided line above episteme or mathematicos, the ideas or the theoi, but we're also we're clearing out both the top levels of the suke, both the top levels of the divided line of Plato, and then we're saying there's still this thing floating around in there called fantasy, which Lacan deals with in that sense, which we have treated in different ways in the tradition of romanticism, this which will be burned away in the soul. So that's the region we're really looking at, and then we say if you can burn all that away, then you would get to this what Zizek is calling the materialist atheist reality. So this is my argument, is all this, we never reach the level of phenomenology, we never reach Husserl. So Zizek has not even reached Husserl, which we have to reach in order to get to the position of Heidegger. So I'll try to amplify this into further videos.